Hey guys, Andrew Henderson, nomadcapitalist.com here in Singapore. You can tell I'm still in Singapore because I'm still wearing my same shirt from the last few videos. But I wanted to talk in this video about two Tier A second citizenships that were easy to get. Easy second passports that no longer exist. I want to share what they are and why this is important. So I had a guy come to me recently who I had talked to and who I had helped out a little bit 2 years ago. And what I often tell people is that when I help someone out figure out what to do, the most common thing is they say, Andrew, okay, now can you just help me set everything up and just make it happen? The second most common thing is to say that they're going to take action, which is very common among us human beings, and then come back a year or two later only after more of the pain of what originally brought them here sunk in. In this guy's case, it was another $300,000 in tax that he paid by not taking action initially. And he said, you know what, Andrew, I want to go right now. You know, how do we get started immediately? Let's just go. I said, well, hold on. The first thing we need to do is start over with a plan, because some of the stuff that we agreed to and that we said you should do a couple years ago no longer exists. Or at least, in his case, most of the stuff was the investment levels were just higher. The countries had raised the investment level. The banks had raised the minimum deposit, etc. And this is something that you see a lot. It's something that I learned the hard way. When I first started this out, I would figure out a lot of second passport programs, and I would tell myself I'm going to do it, and I would always find a reason not to. And I would look back 3 years, 5 years later and think, wow, I could have gotten those second passports. One of them that I was aware of a while ago, I could have gotten before it was too difficult. Actually, both of the second passports out of these two that I'm talking about in the video are ones that I was aware of, and I chose not to pull the trigger on early on. So here is what they are. Two passports that used to be easy to get and that are super high quality. Number one is Belgium. Number two is right here in Singapore. So I've had a number of meetings here in Singapore. I'll start with Singapore. I had a number of meetings. One of my friends here was naturalized in Singapore a number of years ago, back when it was a lot easier. You came here, you could start a company, didn't have to spend much time here. You could get permanent residence rather quickly, and then from there you waited about a year, you filed for citizenship, and they moved really quickly. And you could get citizenship in 5 to 6 months after that. And now, according to some metrics, Singapore is the best passport in the world. It's a visa waiver program country to the United States. You can go to pretty much everywhere in the Americas. You can go to pretty much everywhere in Europe. You can go to China. I mean, this is like a real top-tier travel document, and everyone totally respects it. It used to be really easy to get, and I mean, I talked about back in the 70s and 80s over the years when I've talked about what's the next Singapore. I talked about how easy it was in the 70s or 80s. This guy was here in the late 90s, early 2000s. It was easy. And I remember coming here for the first time about 6 years ago, and they're saying, you know, if you want to get in on easy permanent residence, now's the time. And then when I came here again 5 years ago, they said, hey, the deadline's like a few months away. This is it. And now it's really difficult. They really want you to spend a lot of time here in Singapore to be any kind of, especially permanent resident. Citizenship takes a lot longer. They're a lot more particular. The permanent residence that's required to even be considered for citizenship, more than 2 out of 3 people are rejected for it now, whereas it used to be just like a formality. So Singapore used to be really easy. And so this guy yesterday, basically, when I said the road to Singapore is closed, he's like, absolutely, it's closed. Especially for a nomad capitalist who doesn't want to just put down roots here and live here 365 days of the year. The other one is Belgium. Belgium recently changed their naturalization timeline, recently being about 4 or 5 years ago. It went from 3 years, and it was easier, to 5 years, where now 5 years is not even guaranteed. My belief is that the European Union wants to have a kind of a floor of 5 years for naturalization, that they don't want any country to go lower than that, which is why they don't like the CBI programs in Malta and Cyprus, or to a lesser extent in Bulgaria. And so Belgium went from 3 years, and it was relatively, again, kind of a formality. If you ran some kind of business there, if you had some kind of wealth, you could just get a residence permit, you could get in. Wait 3 years, not spend that much time there. You could bounce around Europe, and then you'd come back and collect your passport. You'd have to speak some of the language, but okay, not that difficult. Now it's 5 years, Really, it's more like 7 years. They're a lot more difficult now. They're a lot more contemplative of who they take on. And so that's another door that I think has really, in the last 6 to 12 months, started to close. Is it still possible to get residence in Singapore? Absolutely. Is it still possible to get residence in Belgium? Absolutely. So to say that these are not options is wrong. Are they options for the average nomad capitalist? Are you willing, how much tax are you willing to pay? How much time are you willing to put in? I think Belgium is actually probably still easier than Singapore if you're willing to do something. But if you're just looking to show up, open a bank account, come back in 3 years, here's my passport, no, those are done. And so, the lesson as always is, you snooze, you lose. I always say that, and it's so relevant in this business because, there are a finite number of countries, and there are a finite number of good countries, and you could argue that the number of safe, stable, sound countries with good passports are actually shrinking. Look at Venezuela, look at, so many other countries that have good passports, were once good, and now they're not doing so well. So there's a finite number of places that perhaps is shrinking, certainly not really growing that much. But there are a lot more people who are looking to go to those countries. There are a lot of Chinese, as I was discussing with my friend last night, are radically overpaying for dubious passports at times. There are a lot of Russians. There are a lot of Middle Easterners. There are a lot of people who 10, 20 years ago didn't have money. Back when Peru would sell you citizenship for $25,000 in the early 90s, you didn't have that many Chinese looking for it. If Peru did that today, they'd have 1 million Chinese going there and buying their passports. And they could charge a lot more. So the reality is, prices are not coming down. Requirements are not coming down. There will be, as I always say, the next Singapore, the next big place. There will always be some new place if you're willing to take a chance on that. And obviously that's what I do, is try and figure out what are the places that have a pretty low risk that you can take a chance on and just wait for the benefits to slowly roll out over the next few years. But in terms of TRA passports right now, if you want that quick hit, if you want that guaranteed stability, it's a lot more difficult. And that's largely because plenty of Chinese guys who have $1 million. Hong Kong shut down their program. Singapore's raised their requirements. Even to get into Singapore, unless you're going to have a real job in a very desirable field or start a company in a field like energy or pharmaceuticals, it's difficult. And if you want to invest, you better have a huge company. And you better be ready to make a multi-million-dollar investment. And even then, citizenship may not be a reality. And it will require you to live here. So a lot of stuff is changing. The requirements are getting tighter. Definitely something to keep in mind, especially if you want that top-tier passport. Lots more videos here on Second Passports on YouTube. Subscribe, get all of them. Make sure you keep up to date with what we're doing every week. So definitely subscribe to our channel and definitely check out nomadcapitalist.com.